Welcome to another edition of Who's Better Baseball. I am back after my trip to DC, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Mets trip to London. Great week for me. Maybe I got to stop hosting this show, Patrick, because it seems like the Mets all of a sudden turning things around for me. So I'm happy. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Rockies are in St. Louis, so a little bit of a respite before Pirates, Dodgers, Nationals, and it looks like Paul Skeens is coming to Coors Field here pretty soon. It's going to be starting, in fact, on Father's Day. So
Wow.
I'll celebrate with my dad a different day.
That's pretty awesome to see Skeens in person. I can't wait to talk to you about that when you get your first look at him. So yeah, like I said, London series.
Yeah.
I don't know if you caught any of it, but a lot of fun. Those games packed out, huge ballpark. You have the funkiness of a soccer stadium converted to a baseball field where balls are just hopping all over the place because it's like, concrete that just lays some dirt on, some grass on. But it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to watch these games, and my Mets able to grab one on the way out. So feeling pretty good about this Mets team. When I was in DC, they got a sweep, so I'm taking all the credit for all their future success. It was my traveling, my spending my hard-earned money to head out there that has corrected things for this Mets team. And now World Series. I mean, you never know. What is it, 6 of 8 that they've won, something like that?
The Mets are global contenders, right? They win in New York City, New York State, all around the United States, the District of Columbia, and now Europe. They are just unstoppable.
The sad thing is they actually don't win in New York, and they're heading back to New York where they've had a horrible home record this year. So I don't know how they'll fare. But you get the Marlins coming to town. My hope is the Mets can, for once this season, maintain some momentum and maybe sneak back into this race. But the big news really right now is if you are a baseball fan, which I hope you are if you're listening to the show, all-star balloting. It's open. You can vote for your favorite players. You can maybe take that responsibility seriously, though, and vote for the best possible players to fill out your all-star ballots. And we're going to talk about some of the more contentious races that we got with some of the biggest stars in the game. Voting closes on Thursday, June 27th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You made a note in here, and I think we can talk about this first before we get into the battles. Mike Trout, he's eligible, right? You can still vote for him even though he's hurt. Is that what's going to happen here? Because you have him last 10 years, Mike Trout has been voted as an all-star, and rightfully so.
Yeah, this almost guarantees it. I haven't gone in yet. I haven't done any of the voting, so I don't think he's even going to be placed on the ballot. That's one thing that has definitely changed in the digital era now, where you can kind of be very current if a player is out for the entirety of a season. Then again, if they are a major player like a Mike Trout, you do want that on your resume, which is a big thing. It's just a big change in general. I was talking with one of the newer members of the Rockies press box about how there used to be paper ballots, and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
now a generation of fans that don't even know that that was a thing, that you would go to the ballpark. That was the only spot that you could go to vote, and you got your little trifold paper, and you take your little golf pencil that you're keeping
Mm-hmm.
score with. You'd poke out the little chads there, and that was your ballot, and that was how they decided that. I actually used to keep a couple from like every single year when I would go to the ballpark. I'm like, oh, this is kind of a cool little keepsake. And now looking back 10, 15, 20 years later, I'm glad I definitely kept those. So it's interesting how voting has evolved over time.
Do you think it was easier to rig the ballot then or now? I mean, now it's just computers, right? So you can Major League Baseball can kind of just put in some extra ones and zeros and figure it out. They want to change things up, but I don't know how it used to work back in the day. I mean, was there someone that was just counting each of those things? They throw them through a machine. Definitely has gotten a lot easier, I'm sure. But
I
yeah,
think I think it was probably was a little bit easier to rig it back in the day, and
just
I
stuff
think
the
now,
ballots.
yeah, and I think that can still happen now. However, baseball has created this new format where, as you just said, June 27th, phase one is complete, and then there's a whole phase two. So it weeds out the Kansas City Royals from stuffing the ballot and getting all their guys in, because once phase one is complete, okay, cool, Mike Moustakas is there at third base, but there's another guy that he has to go against in the American League, or Alcides Escobar starting at shortstop. And you go, all right, I mean, he's had a really good year, but if he's going toe to toe to with a superstar at shortstop in the American League. Hey, good try. You're going to be the runner-up there at shortstop, Alcides. So the two-phase process, I think, is going to probably help balance things and prevent a club from getting 5 or more players. And then again, some teams just kind of have those types of seasons where they deserve it. But the 6th and the 7th, and then again, your left fielder who's hitting 8th in your lineup, those days are definitely gone.
You mentioned this stuff in the ballot boxes, and it reminded me of an old Mets story where Gary Carter used to literally bring ballots and stuff them, have people go and stuff the ballot boxes himself. At least that was the old tale. And I was just curious, and actually I could have gone down to your notes here about the catcher position because Gary Carter is mentioned, but I looked 11-time All-Star Gary Carter. So I think it worked for him. I'll also note you can vote for Mike Trout. He is listed. Joe Adell, not listed. You got to write him in, even though Joe Adell having a pretty good season over there in Anaheim. I think their all-star might be Tyler Anderson. I don't know. That's a story for another day. Probably not one that people care about. Who will be the Angels all-star? I don't know if people are going to be too fired up about that one.
Would that upset you if Mike Trout was voted in? He was first, second, or third most votes in the American League outfield. Well, this year's probably a bad example, but would that almost be upsetting that fans are just not paying attention? Or do you look at it as, look at that. They recognize that this guy is a first ballot Hall of Famer. And despite the fact that he's not going to start, they kind of want to see him there in Texas, especially if you're going to the game, and at least allow him that extra all-star game appearance on his plaque and his baseball reference page. Which side of the fence do you land on that one?
Personally, I feel like Mike Trout has gotten, plenty of all-star recognition throughout his career, and it's better to, granted, it doesn't necessarily take away from somebody else because he gets the honor and then he's removed. But if he's voted as the starter, let's vote starters in who are actually playing the game. So that's where I'm at with it. Honestly, if I'm Major League Baseball, I get it, but I almost feel like they shouldn't have him listed. Why isn't Joe Adell up there right now? He's a guy who's actually playing baseball, having a lot of success. If I'm an Angels fan, I got to write in Joe Adell. And not to say that he deserves it, because I don't know if his all-star resume really stacks up as far as a starting outfield that's going to include Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. He probably wouldn't sneak in anyway, but it's just something that a little bit interesting that you can vote for him still. But
maybe we're going to start really calculating statistics as far as all-star game votes, because I say this a lot, all the information is available on the internet, but it's in all different places.
Yeah.
It would be interesting if you could sort it on Baseball Reference or somewhere and see exactly how many votes, millions, or in the case of maybe Mike Trout, hundreds of millions of votes he's received in the All-Star game. That would be a fun statistic to know. So maybe that's one of the reasons why Major League Baseball is doing that. Do you think Mike Trout cares at all? Absolutely not. But it could be a fun little thing that opens up a box, and we were able to kind of sort votes and find out over the course of a player's career how many votes they received for the All-Star game. That'd be cool.
Put it on Mike Trout's Hall of Fame plaque. 10 billion votes in All-Star games throughout his 20-year career. Let's go through some of these battles we got. And I think the first one is the most interesting. Bryce Harper versus Freddie Freeman. And the interesting thing to me, though, is Freddie Freeman has had a very quiet year where you haven't heard a lot about him. It's been about Betts and Ohtani. And when you put that in the notes, and I'm looking at him like, Bryce Harper is better. He's going to be clearly starting the All-Star game. Then I looked at Freddie's numbers, and I was like, wait a minute. Freddie Freeman, when did you put up all these stats? Once again, he is one of the best hitters in baseball. No surprise there. He's batting .293, .399 on base, .488 slug. He's got a 152 WRC plus, 2 behind Bryce Harper. Their stats are nearly identical. WAR totals, Harper at 2.5, Freeman at 2.3. Harper does have him in home runs and RBIs, but I was shocked just on the surface at how good Freddie Freeman has been once again. And it is a tough debate on who will actually get that nod. I would lean Bryce, but you never know. Dodgers fans typically do fill out those ballots pretty well as well.
It's almost a conversation about Bryce Harper being a more valuable player to the Phillies, partially because Freddie Freeman has 2 other valuable teammates in Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani, but yet Freddie Freeman, just as a first baseman alone, has probably been a touch better. Now Harper's been solid defensively over at first base, and making that switch in a hard way. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to be an outfielder, your entire big league career, and then move to the dirt. It's different when you're an infielder going to the outfield, but going the opposite way, it's an absolute rarity. So that Bryce Harper is a very special player in that capacity, and you have two of the best teams in the National League, and the Phillies and Dodgers represented there, and in many ways, this is almost one of the most fun battles, I think. Also, this is the first year that Harper really can stake a claim to first base in the National League because of his late start last season with the internal brace surgery that he got, the kind of pseudo Tommy John, going into the 2023 season. So this is really his first bite at that all-star apple, and Freddie Freeman saying, hold on a second, I've kind of been doing this thing for a long time in the senior circuit. Maybe you need to get in line. And so, yeah, it's Harper versus Freeman. It's Phillies fans versus Dodgers fans. It's very interesting.
It really is. And honestly, it actually kind of brings us back to our preseason rankings because we did top 10 first baseman. And I remember a lot of us, it was kind of like you had to remember, oh, yeah, Harper's a first baseman now. Where do you put him? And it was really tough to sort of figure out the rankings. I had to go back and look at because I almost feel like we might have even been a little bit like lower than we should have been on Harper because I know we had Matt Olson above him. And Freddie Freeman, I think, was number one for us. I'm curious if we put Pete Alonso. I don't think we would have, but there was that weird math that we were trying to do that it complicated things. I'm scrolling through right now quickly. We had Alonso 4, we had Harper 3. But now, I mean, clearly with the struggles that Olson has had, Harper's at least 1 or 2. But moving forward, is Bryce Harper going to be the best first baseman in baseball for like an extended window the same way Freddie Freeman has? Because I think the runway is there for him, and I think this is going to keep him healthy. And 5 outs above average of the position, seems like he's going to be a great defender over there that he can age really well at that spot too. So this could be a changing of the guard, but Freeman might hold him off for one more year.
I like that take about Harper kind of owning this position, especially in terms of the All-Star game where, star power is obviously one of the biggest things. And first baseman, for whatever reason, despite the fact they always put up great numbers, they aren't the sexiest of players. They're just maybe a little too lumbering. They don't have a personality quite, very much. I don't think you need one. You just need to make small talk over at first base. You almost have to not have a personality. And we know Bryce Harper absolutely has one. So he could lock down that position in a big way. And it's just so interesting too, that the top 4 here in the Just Baseball preview of first baseman. And then really in the conversation of who are the top 4 guys that should represent the National League. And really only 3 of them are going to make it, that they're just so inextricably linked together. Phillies, Mets, Alonso, Harper. You've got Matt Olson also in the National League East. And who did he take first base over from in Atlanta? Freddie Freeman. So it's amazing how all these guys' stories are just connected like that.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think for this year, I don't know. I guess, is it definitely 3 per position? Because I'd even wonder if Olson or Alonso gets it because they're just not having the best starts to their season. The home runs are still there, but overall, just not quite the hitters that they've been in past years, where Harper and Freeman are just so head and shoulders better. And I do think the voting will come down to the 2 of them. And I think Phillies fans are going to show up big for Bryce Harper. To see him, in the London series, I don't know if you watched it, hits the home run, does the soccer knee celebration, sliding into the dugout. The guy lives for the moment. And it's even as a Mets fan that has to watch Bryce Harper on the Phillies, baseball's so much better when that guy's healthy. And I'm just happy that maybe he's found a position that will allow us to see an extended period, because this guy's going to be a Hall of Famer if he can stay healthy. And he's past 300 home runs. Like, there's milestones that he can get to, along with his incredible resume in the postseason. So I'm happy to see Harper thriving at first base. And I believe he will be the one that gets that vote when it's all said and done.
Are we sure that there's enough railing and enough protected netting in both dugouts, usually on the first base side, that's going to keep Bryce Harper healthy? Because we've seen him go
Yeah.
into the camera wells a lot. And I think Oakland, they don't have any railing whatsoever. So let's make sure the Phillies don't play at Oakland Coliseum again, so that your prediction is right about Harper, being the exciting player that he is, and being a little bit safer over at first base. But whoever the genius was over at on X at Who's Better BB actually posted a question: whose London celebration was better, Bryce Harper or Cristiano Ronaldo? Because they were very evocative of one another. And I didn't get a chance yet. I wonder if Pitching Ninja, I could see him doing a nice side by side of both of their knee first slides in celebrating there in London. But I don't know if you've got a preference, but it was a nice touch for Harper, unfortunately, against your team.
Yeah, I think he was done a little bit dirty by the camera angles. You didn't get to really see the full slide. I think some of the soccer guys like Ronaldo, they really get a lot more into it. They're able to slide a lot further, probably because they're playing on fields that are kind of more established than the one. I mean, Harper's lucky he didn't end up injured on that. Because
Yeah.
like that. I mean, I could see the nightmare scenario of Bryce Harper, does something with his knee doing that slide. It felt a little forced. I'm just gonna say it. It did feel a little bit forced from Bryce Harper. Then he's yelling, "I love soccer." It felt a little bit. I mean, it was clearly premeditated. It wasn't kind of a just natural raw emotion moment, but
Was it
it's
as organic as him turning a double play with Chase Utley and Rob McElhenney? Was it as organic as that, or was that
about
also planned, you think?
I think it was just the exact same amount of organic. Exactly. That's the perfect example of how organic it was, which is not very at all.
Fair, fair.
Let's move across the diamond and to another league. We're going to talk American League third base now. José Ramírez versus Rafael Devers. Again, another one where you put it on the list, and I'm like, José Ramírez, obviously. And then I look at the stats, and I'm seeing here's Rafael Devers, has José Ramírez in average, has him in on base, has him in slug, has him in weighted runs created plus, has him in pretty much everything but F4 and home runs. And then, oh yeah, RBIs, massive difference. But I think that's partially due to the teams they play for. You got José Ramírez leading all of baseball in RBIs over 60. And then you got Rafael Devers sitting at 32. But that's going to be an interesting vote. On the surface, I would have thought José Ramírez for sure. But Rafael Devers, from what he can control, it's pretty damn close.
He really is almost a clone of José Ramírez, it feels like, for right now, a Boston Red Sox club that seemingly only has the identity of their third baseman. They've got some good young starting pitchers, but ultimately, you go back to the last time that they were relevant in the American League East, Rafael Devers was there for that. And you think about them doing it again here, either this season and being in the wild card hunt, or being relevant, next season and going forward. Rafael Devers is going to be a large part of that as well. And so him and José Ramírez being the last two standing in the American League for third base, again, isn't even just about who deserves it more at the position. It's which fan base is going to turn out more. And it wouldn't surprise you if Boston fans turn out more. Now, I think that the average fan is probably going to lean more towards José Ramírez. But if Boston really has only one shot at getting one of their guys in, because despite how good their pitching has been, fans do not vote on pitching whatsoever, which is another element that I think a lot of loosely based baseball fans don't realize. You don't vote on pitchers. They're selected by the coaches and managers and the commissioner and whatnot. So this could be Boston's one shot to get a starter in, and that could be an upset. But as you pointed out, not as much as I think a lot of people realized.
I think if Devers wants a shot, this finals in the NBA's got to wrap up early. I think no one is paying attention to the Boston Red Sox right now. They got an NBA Finals to watch, but they're looking pretty good on that front. So maybe a couple weeks left after that. The momentum carries over. The fans like, what do we have to watch? I guess we got to watch baseball, and maybe they start stuffing some ballots, or I guess plugging some ballots online.
Hey, let's send another Bostonian to Dallas. The
Oh,
All-Star game.
how about that?
Come on, that works. That works.
You gotta reach out to someone with the Red Sox and just give them that because that's a genius marketing idea. I imagine it will come down to those two, but I do want to give a shout out to a guy that I think will be there as well as an all-star that is a third baseman that does continue to give the American League another good option, and that is Isaac Paredes, who no one talks about. And he is on fire this year. He's hitting 288, 373 on base, 42 slug. He's got 10 home runs. He has been their best player. So I think Paredes should be the guy for the Rays, but he's going to be a bench guy.
Yeah, if you look at a list of players who had 30 home runs last year, you will see Isaac Paredes there, and you'll go, "What? Oh, that's the guy that Ryan was talking about." Yeah, absolutely. He deserves a lot of respect, and he's kind of a classic Rays player because if you look at where most of his home runs have been hit, it's directly down the line, like the closest part to home plate. And so he's very much, sabermetrically inclined to say, well, if I'm going to hit one out, the best way is if I just yank it down the line. And so that's been working for him. And that gave Detroit, or excuse me, that gave Tampa Bay a definite steal from Detroit, who they got in a trade not too long ago. So the Rays looking solid in that deal, and Paredes definitely a surprise and deserves a lot more credit.
It's crazy because I've seen some trade buzz around him right now as far as this might be the time where the Rays decide to sell. I think he has 3 years of control beyond this season. So you would get a haul for him. We're going to have a really fun article coming to Just Baseball probably later this week where we are breaking down the top 25 players when it comes to trade value at this deadline. We might do a little bit of this on the next Who's Better show, sort of going through the list that we come up with. But he's going to be featured very prominently atop that list, I think, because if he does get dealt, considering how well he has played, not just this year, but last year with the control that he has, any team that needs a third baseman that can get a guy and have him plug and play for the next 3.5 years, that's big time. But if you had to pick one, though, getting back to the original conversation, who do you think will start at third base at this All-Star game? You got José Ramírez or Rafael Devers?
I'll stick with the chalk and go with J-Ram. José Ramírez is an exciting player, and I think a lot of America, a lot of baseball fans are starting to realize and recognize that, sure, Cleveland has a rotating cast of young players, but the one constant is José Ramírez, and he's been outstanding. He's been top 5 MVP candidate, and you can't really look past that whatsoever. So I think José Ramírez is going to be the starting third baseman for the American League down in Texas.
I really want to see José Ramírez not just start in the All-Star game because I agree with you, but I'd love to see him win an MVP, and I feel like this would be the year to do it based on the team that he has. And if you just really boil down what most valuable means, I think he is the guy. The problem, Aaron Judge looks like Aaron Judge from a couple years ago, and I don't know if anything's going to stand in Aaron Judge's way from winning another MVP because when he's playing at this level, he's unstoppable. And so I imagine he's going to get another one in his trophy case, but the dark horse that I'm pulling for in the American League is absolutely José Ramírez.
Yeah, no, that's fair about Aaron Judge. He's been outstanding. I was looking at the division standings, and I was sort of thinking, like, what's more shocking, the fact that the Rays are only 3 games under 500, yet they're 14 games back of first place, and then you've got the Mets are 8 games under 500 and they're 16 and a half, like. Or the Rockies with the second worst record in the National League, only, quote unquote, 17 games back of the Dodgers. And again, you've got the Rays in the mix, really, or should be right around 500, and they're sitting 14 games back of the Yankees. Again, got to give a lot of that credit to Judge and Juan Soto.
I do think that you look at these divisional races, and it doesn't really feel like there's much of any. I mean, yes, you have like Yankees, Orioles. There's a couple. But it sort of feels like in most of these divisions, there's a top team that's separating themselves. And then the wild card race is just an absolute free for all in both leagues. So that's something we're going to have to monitor. There are a couple, like the Central still sort of wide open with the Guardians only 4 games up. But it definitely is something where it feels like we're just going to be watching for the wild card this year. So we'll see how that ends up shaking out. Let's talk about some backstops. Each league. We'll start in the National League. Will Smith versus William Contreras. Which of these you guys do you have here?
Man, the Dodger over the Milwaukee Brewer. Again, the numbers probably aren't going to amount to be enough for William Contreras, despite him being more valuable. Again, similar to the Harper Freeman Phillies versus Dodgers, where Smith is fourth on the depth chart. After the weekend in New York, Teoscar Hernandez, you say maybe he's actually been more valuable than Will Smith, but both of those guys have been great, and Will Smith has been fine, I guess. A player with only one All-Star appearance to this point after signing, just signed a large extension with the Dodgers, but it's kind of more circumstantial than anything. So, I think both of them are very much deserving, and I know for William Contreras, it would be somewhat of a first time in a long time, because I think the last time that a Brewers catcher was voted to start at catcher was Hall of Famer Ted Simmons in like 1983. So
Wow.
That's kind of interesting, and that certainly would be nice for that franchise there. So, but I again tend to lean towards the chalk there, and I think the fans will probably support Will Smith, and I think he has maybe a little bit more brand awareness or recognition, right? Like I think people might know Will Smith a little bit more than William Contreras. I could be wrong on that one though. What do you think?
I think there is maybe a case to be made that William Contreras, from the sort of general baseball fan, not necessarily a casual, but someone that pays attention to the game, might know Contreras more in the sense that he really has, from having his great season with the Braves where he was an all-star at DH, to the breakout campaign last year as a catcher, to what we've seen now as him sort of being the face of this revitalized Brewers team that's been so much fun. Him and Christian Yelich having unbelievable resurgent season. Maybe he does have a slight edge on recognition. Like I think if you were to poll like 10 of our writers at Just Baseball, I think that Contreras would maybe be favored, but there's still the fact that Will Smith is playing for the Dodgers, has that behind him. And I'm looking at the stats because Contreras got out to an early lead in this. I mean, it is as close as you can get. They're identical in weighted runs created plus. Their OPS is separated by 8 points. Smith has the edge. You look at their WAR totals, they're separated by a single point. So there are the baseball fans that will go to a Fangraphs and they will just look at, all right, who is the most valuable? And they will vote that player. Day by day, it could change on where you'd vote because these guys are that close to each other. So both of them is very deserving. I'd like to see Contreras go because I think it's just a better story to follow. At the same time, though, Will Smith at some point deserves to get recognition because he has consistently been one of the best catchers in baseball. And he does feel like a guy that gets overlooked a lot in that conversation.
Yeah, they're very similar in that way too. Also, in the literal sense of name recognition, who has less recognition than a guy named Will Smith in baseball? There's another Will Smith that's won World Series the last 3 years and never once laid his hands on Chris Rock. And then you have another catcher named W. Contreras that's not a 3-time All-Star, and Wilson Contreras. No, we're talking about William Contreras. So it is crazy how that kind of lines up in that way. And yeah, I don't know how this one's going to stack up, right? It could very much go down to that phase 2 voting, or like who's hot during that period of time. You're right. And it will be very interesting to see who goes, because this is one of those cases where I think whoever doesn't win almost is assured a spot in Texas, in Arlington. Whereas in some of the other ones, someone could possibly get left off, like Rafael Devers is doing great, but sometimes guys get squeezed out because every team does need to have a representative. So I think this one will be another really fun battle to watch.
Yeah, I think of all the names we discussed so far, Devers probably is the one that could get squeezed because you have Perez, where he might need to be the Rays All-Star. I think Tanner Houck is absolutely going to be an All-Star for the Red Sox, so they're going to have some pitchers that sneak in there, and so maybe that happens. Ultimately, I'd imagine all these guys get in. One thing I have that'll sort of bridge us to our next topic on this, our next positional battle. Did we crown Adley Rutschman too soon? Because he comes up and we're all just like, all right, that's the best catcher in baseball. He's going to be the best catcher in baseball for the next decade. But Will Smith has been here, and William Contreras is really good too. I don't know. Like next year, we do the just baseball top 10 catchers. Are we just going to default to Adley again? Or can one of these guys do enough this season that we pause on that and say maybe Adley Rutschman is just considered, instead of just consensus top catcher in baseball, maybe he's just one of the best three, and these guys are right there with him? Because I think before this season, we sort of felt like there was this separation where Rutschman was just clearly better. And what we've seen play out, he's actually been the third best. And those two guys, I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon.
I think that will not happen now because you said that, because you've put that out there into the world, and not that because you're making this up, because that's true. I think there are some players that do get crowned as being the next so and so, or the second coming, or just, hey, this guy is in a class of their own, and that might be true. Like, again, in 3 months from now, we could be looking back and going, hey, remember when we were like saying, you know what, Will Smith deserves a little bit more praise, and William Contreras than Adley Rutschman, at that point in time. Like that could be, kind of, we might laugh at that, right? But there very much is truth in that, where you look at the numbers and you say, okay, they're not exactly there. Now, what he does as a backstop, again, defensive metrics, are still trailing behind the offensive ones that we have that are available. And he certainly is a special player and is a leader. Like, there are those intangibles, right? But when we're, when you've got the cream of the crop, when you've got three really talented catchers, I think a lot of them have that intangible quality as a leader. So, you have to default a little bit to the numbers. And so for that reason, yeah, Adley Rutschman would then fall third behind Will Smith and William Contreras. And maybe at some point we get to a conversation all right, he's third in baseball, but is he actually fourth this season when it comes to all-star voting? I don't know.
Well, that does bring us right to our next topic here, which is Adley Rutschman versus Salvador Perez. I don't think any of us would have expected to have this conversation 3 months ago, but here's Salvador Perez. I don't know if him and Christian Yelich are both sipping out of the same fountain of youth this offseason, but I mean, wow. Perez has been unbelievable, and he's been a part of it. One of the teams that's been the best stories in baseball this year in the Royals. And you look at the offensive numbers, he's got Adley in batting average by a hair, 304 to 300, and that was prior to Sunday's play, so that might have changed. He's got him on base percentage and slug, though, by a good margin. His OPS must be probably about 60 points better, I'd assume. You look at the WAR totals, they're identical. Salvador Perez, should he start another all-star game here? And would Adley be a backup in this situation?
Well, we did our first time all-star draft, and I doubled down and said, okay, Bobby Witt Jr. at shortstop, Adley Rutschman at catcher, and almost immediately said, I think that might be wrong. I might have it backwards. I think Gunner's going to start at short, and Salvy's going to start at catcher. So I like trying to have my cake and eat it too. I love hedging bets. You might not know that about me just yet. So now I forget which one I'm supposed to say in order to make myself right at some point. No, I don't know how this one's going to wind up. I know there's a lot of Orioles having really great years, and I think a lot of the new younger fans are probably going to lean towards younger players like an Adley Rutschman versus the old man Salvador Perez, who's really not that old. At what, he's about 34, which again in baseball parlance that is getting up there, and for a catcher that's up there. But he's one of those special players where if you look at all his all-star game appearances and Gold Glove awards, I wrote about that a month or so ago, about like, we're looking at a Hall of Famer here, right? And really, this is just kind of padding that resume that much more to, is he a second, third, fourth ballot Hall of Famer, or should he start the All-Star game this year in Texas? That now puts him in an even more elite class. If he's able to lead Kansas City to the postseason, go on yet another run, the guy who was the 2015 World Series MVP could have, another thing on his Hall of Fame plaque that says, he deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer when he decides to hang it up. A lot is in the balance here in this debate, but I think because of the younger fans are going to more closely identify with Adley Rutschman, I think he might end up winning out in this battle.
I think you're probably right. I also got to ask, was it hard for you to say 2015 instead of 2016 there? Because I know you struggle with that one. Where you got it right.
Yes.
You got it right. I watched the break. For some reason that's just something that you just can't figure out. I saw you like, is it 2015? I think it's 2015. You got it though.
I've said that that's on the blooper reel. We're working on getting a little blooper reel of how many times where I say, oh, Chris Bryant, the 2017 World Series MVP. No, it was 2016. I don't know why my brain does that. I think because Kansas City did the thing where they lost in 14, but then they came back in 2015, and you got your dumb Mets cap on, and that's throwing me off here. Okay, let's just have World Series flags behind us, and then I'll be more locked in on the year that we're talking about. But yeah, no, you nailed me. Yeah, I do screw that. I've at least twice, probably 3 times.
Oh yeah, different variations.
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, there's from the Mets side when the Mets were in the World Series 16, from the Royals winning in 16. But I think we got you. I think we got it figured out though.
3+. It's 3+, but I got it.
I think you've been on a much straighter path to that lead. I think you've been hitting it the last couple times. Let's go to some team topics here, and I want to really dive into the Atlanta Braves because they are sitting in a position where they're still 7 games over 500, and we're just like, oh, the Braves are good. The Braves are fine. The Braves are fine. Well, I did some digging since May 14th. The Atlanta Braves, and that was actually at a point of the season where they had won 6 of 7 games. They looked like the Braves still. They were 7-4 to start the month of May. They were doing fine. At the time, they're 26-13. Since they've gone 9-15, and they've lost a lot of 4-game series, which for a team as good as Atlanta, you just expect them in a 4-game set to at least grab 2. They lost a 4-game set to the Padres. They've lost 2 separate 4-game sets to the Nationals, including this weekend. They also lost a series to the Pirates in there. So here's this Braves team, and the offense has just gone down the tank. Over the last 23 games, the Braves are hitting 226 as a team, 280 on base, 379 slug, 85 WRC plus is the 5th worst mark for any team in baseball. They're 23rd in runs scored. They're 20th in home runs. They only have 2 players in their starting lineup who have been above average hitters based on WRC plus, and that's Marcell Ozuna and Matt Olson. Everybody else is collectively slumping. Are we at all concerned about the Atlanta Braves this season?
No.
Okay. No. That's it.
No.
Cool.
I think the conversation with Atlanta, and again, this is such a good point because it's still worth talking about, despite the fact that I've got confidence in Atlanta. It's worth talking about, like at the beginning of the season. Hey, are the Astros broken? Are they done for this year? My answer to that was no, because I think Houston and Atlanta are 2 clubs that understand how long a season can be and understand what it takes to get to the postseason. And it's just going to now, instead of them wrapping up a postseason berth or wrapping up their division that first, second week of September, and then just retooling and getting ready for a deep run in October, they're going to have to do it in the 150 something game. And I think they're certainly not going to be cashing out, right? They're not going to be making any trades. They might be they might see teams above them in the standings, and certainly below them in the standings that are making trades to cast off guys and wave the white flag. But Houston's not going to do that, even 6 games under 500 at this point. And Atlanta's certainly not. They're still above 500. They're going to look to add, and they've had the secret before too, with Alex Anthopoulos just bringing in a bunch of outfielders and plugging them into a system that works really well. And so as we get to that point now here on June 10th, where you might start seeing some of these bottom dwellers start trading some chips, right? Last year it was Mike Moustakas was one of the first guys going to the Angels, where they just needed a veteran left-handed bat. Whoever has a veteran outfielder for them to utilize right now, because they've been struggling really badly, as you pointed out, since Ronald Acuna has gone down, they'll just go ahead and add that guy, and it'll kind of work out, and they'll be able to tread water a little bit more and find themselves still a little bit around 500 once they start getting guys back and figuring it out what is our next step? Who are going to be the replacements? Is it going to be players that are down in Gwinnett, or do we need to go elsewhere and go outside the org and make some trades?
When we were talking about the Astros, like you said, you had full confidence. I was one saying, I don't know. It's a big hole. For the Braves, they're not in that position where they're in a hole. So I do concede that I don't believe that this Braves team is going to suddenly miss the playoffs. With that said, I have some real questions about can they make a run this year, because you lose Acuna, you lose Strider. I mean, those are massive, massive losses. And I don't know if Tommy Pham's going to come here and fix that. Granted, they should go out and get Tommy Pham right now. Like, he's there. The White Sox aren't doing anything. They've traded before. Make a deal. Get Tommy Pham, because that's going to make you better. I even look at shortstop. How long are they going to have Orlando Arcia as their starter? He's great defensively, but if Austin Riley's not hitting the way he should, because he's struggled a lot this year. And granted, I expect Riley will turn it on at some point. In the past, he has been a second half player too, but there's so much pressure when the entire lineup is struggling. That shortstop that's just supposed to be the defensive guy, well, that looks a little more glaring. So I'm really curious how they address this deadline, because you look at the Phillies and they've lost Trey Turner for the past month, and Amundo Sosa has slid in and just been the guy and has been able to keep that level of play very high. The Braves have been the team in the past where they plug and play a guy and it works out. But right now, you look at their team, it's always a team that just runs out the same starters every day. And now that Acuna's not in the mix and Riley is struggling the way he is, and even Albies is struggling and their catchers are struggling, they just look a lot more thin than they have in recent years where they've just been unstoppable. I think this is a team that's still going to make the playoffs, but when we're at the end of the year, I think we're going to be looking at Phillies, Dodgers as that top tier, and the Braves are sort of the best of the rest.
I think the best way to probably describe it is we're not worried about them missing out on the postseason. It's just we have almost no confidence in them once they get there. And I'll say that, we know the postseason is a little bit of a crapshoot. So if Charlie Morton ends up being that guy that they go to for 4 straight series to get them into the World Series or to win the World Series, that won't be totally surprising. But still, if we're talking about it in terms of confidence, it's definitely taken, a big hit. And, we've talked about their bench now and that they've currently got with Julio Pablo Martinez, ya boy Zach Short. Now they picked Brian Anderson up off the scrap heap, and they've got a guy that they just drafted last year who I really liked out of the University of Florida, but Hurston Waldrop already making his debut. Different situation than the Angels, kind of forcing these guys up because he was doing it really well in Double-A. So in general, you're right. The confidence just isn't there because they are piecing some things together. That being said, those pieces, again, as long as they know their role, they'll be okay. But it just puts that much more pressure on Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez being the guys, because those have been the only 2 reliable ones on the pitching staff. And as you said, Matt Olson being one of the few guys, along with Marcell Ozuna, doing it offensively. They need more help. They need 2 or 3 more guys to step up for them to really, threaten as being a team you can have some confidence in October.
I think they have to be super aggressive at this deadline. I think they need an outfielder for sure. They can probably get by in the infield, but maybe if they could get some type of a player that has the flexibility to play on the dirt and the grass and give you something with the bat. I don't know who that player is. I'll know better when we work through our top 25 of trade value coming up here. I'll have a better understanding of who is going to potentially be out there. I think they need to find just that one piece. Maybe it is one guy that can do both. That'll just kind of shore up all the holes in one guy. And I think they got to add a top end starter, because Charlie Morton has not pitched well lately. And you're looking at him and you got to wonder with age, I mean, how much longer can he continue to just outperform expectations? Chris Sale is a age and injury risk. Max Fried had an injury-riddled season last year. Ronaldo Lopez is starting for the first time for a full season since like 2018 or 2019. That's a lot of question marks in a rotation. And it just feels like they have to get somebody else. And with Freed, a free agent after this year, I know they talked about this on the Just Baseball show, getting Garrett Crochet, to see them swing a deal for a starter that has some control. Maybe it's Jesus Luzardo, who's maybe a depreciated asset because he hasn't pitched as well this year. You get him, he has control, you try to fix him. But I think they have to get a big-time starting pitcher at this deadline. And then they got to do the Alex Anthopoulos thing, like you mentioned, of just, all right, where can we find some value to just help our overall depth? I think they're a team that I'm not worried about making the playoffs, but I will be very focused on what they do at the deadline and watching closely after that to see how they can come together if I'm really buying stock in them making a run once we get to October.
And that's the exact opposite of what we thought was going to happen. That
for sure,
their roster was so solid, and they're really going to be adding pieces almost for October. And that's still true here now, but they're also adding pieces to really make sure that they do get in there. If they were in any other division, you can maybe throw in the AL West, but because of how I feel about the Houston Astros as the third best team in that division, 6 games under 500, that doesn't really count. But in any other division, Atlanta might be a concern for the postseason, but with the Marlins, the Mets, and the Nationals, who again, they're on the come up, but still they're suspects for right now, and they're probably going to be selling off some of those veteran pieces that are on a 1-year deal. If they were in any other division, you probably would have a lot more concern.
It's crazy to me that they've lost 2 4-game series against the Nationals. And I haven't watched a ton of Nationals baseball this year because you see the record, you're like, oh, well, they've been pretty good. I watched that team firsthand in DC, and I was like, how are they as good as they've been this year? They're awful. I don't get it. And then to see them after getting swept by the Mets, where they looked very much like a bottom dweller team, to bounce back off of that and take a 4-game series against the Braves, that was where I was like, what is going on there? The fact that the Braves are closer to the Mets and the Nationals in the standings than to the Phillies. No one would have that coming. You're right. I still think they're going to be fine. They're going to make the playoffs. They're so much better than the rest of the slop that's in the wild card race that they're going to be that first wild card seed. I can almost guarantee it, but they'll finally get the taste of it, right? They've been talking for all these years how much they hate the format. Well, imagine they get bounced in the wild card round. Then which one do you want, Snicker? Do you want to be in the wild card? Do you not want to be in the wild card? If your season ends in 2 games, I don't think you'll want to be in the wild card next year. But
now, because you said that, we're gonna have to earmark this. And when they go to the World Series, you go,
I was wrong.
The first one in there.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to say you're going to be right. Like that's why you're marking it, because they end up going to the World Series as the hot like wild card team. Around to heat up. That's why we're earmarking it, because you can be right, my friend. You never.
I don't want to be right about that. I'm trying to say I want them to lose in the wild card round and be embarrassed. That's what I want to see happen. Okay. I want to see them bounced by like the who would be the most embarrassing team to lose to? And I could say the Mets, but that's just low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. Like, would losing to like the Giants in a 3-game series, something like that.
I mean, considering the fact that the Giants have lost, you can't say better players than Acuna Jr. and Strider, but they've lost a lot of players that they've invested in from this past offseason. So that would be great.
Do you know this? You know what we have to mention in that? It's an even year. Does that still matter with the Giants or not?
Ooh.
I mean,
no.
It's 10 years removed from the even year rule. Was it 14? When was the last time they won? Was it 14? I think so.
Somebody doesn't know his World Series from
I'm pretty sure it was 14.
It was 2010, 2012, 2014. Yeah. But in 2021, I think that's right. That's when they won 107 games. So that's odd. So that's not.
Yeah, that threw it all out the window. All right, our last topic of the day. We're going to talk about a team that is super hot right now, the Cincinnati Reds. It feels like it's going to be an ongoing discussion. Who's the second best team in the Central? Can any of them contend with the Brewers? Right now, if you're just judging on who's been playing good baseball as of late, it is the Reds. They've won 7 in a row. They swept the Cubs in a 4-game series. How does Craig Counsell like being on that side to be a Cubs manager now instead of being the Brewers manager, seeing how that whole thing is shaken out? But they also swept your Rockies in there, so I'm sure you got to see it firsthand. What's been going right for this Reds team?
they just have no quit in them. They're fighters, and they've got some interesting pieces that really aren't that loud. It's funny because Ellie De La Cruz did homer in one of the games. He did steal a base, but it felt quiet. And as I went back and look at game notes, it's like, oh, he was 3 for 5 today. It's like, oh yeah, just ho hum, and seeing him take a ground ball, go 6-3 over to first base, it's like he's in slow motion because he's not trying to throw it 106.9 miles an hour. So he's impressive to say the least. Even though, despite the fact that in batting practice he's like popping balls up to the top of the turtle's shell and taking pitches. But no, the Reds are finally doing the thing that everyone was kind of expecting them to do this season after taking a step forward last year in a really big way, winning 80 plus. And then this year being one of those teams that you could see maybe in the NL Central making some noise. And it took them a while to heat up. Hunter Green as the ace of that staff, still only 24 years old, despite it seeming like he's been around, that much longer. So he's been incredible for them. And they've been just getting, quality play out of that veteran crew. I mean, I almost want to lump Spencer Steer in there, but this is only his second season. Jonathan India is back, and so I don't know if they got shook just a little bit early on in the year without having Noelvi Marte and just kind of feeling some of the reverberations from that. But they've definitely turned some things around. I want to say maybe even last week with Clay Snowden that in previewing the series was like, hey, is the Cubs Reds? Is this going to be a series for the Reds to kind of turn things around, knowing that they were going to come into Colorado? They ended up sweeping. Rockies gave up 5 runs for the 5th time in the 9th inning or later. Embarrassing for the sweep, and then playing the Cubs again. So Reds absolutely did that thing where they've completely turned their season around. Now are just 2 games under 500.
Yeah, they've looked great. And the crazy thing is I was diving into the last couple weeks in particular. I'm like, all right, they're getting some great pitching. Not really the case. Nick Lodolo is the exception. Nick Lodolo has been unbelievable. 2.92 ERA in the year. Finally healthy after last year struggling with that. He's won each of his last 3 starts, and the last 2 he's gone 6 innings each time against the Cubs. So that's big time when you have a guy going up against your rival and getting the job done the way Lodolo has. But it's also been Jaimer Candelario, Jonathan India, TJ Friedel, Will Benson. It's not necessarily the top end stars. It's not just Ellie De La Cruz going crazy. It's a collective effort on offense. And over the last 15 days, they had the 4th best team OPS in baseball. So they're doing it offensively. And the clock is starting to tick on the rest of that suspension for Marte. You should have him back, I think, maybe by the end of this month. What was it, 81 game suspension? So maybe got 20 some odd games left. It's getting close, and that's going to really give them a lift. I'm not sure where Matt McClain is, but if you get him back at some point, like they're a team where they don't even necessarily have to be aggressive at the deadline. They just need to get their guys healthy, and they can make a run. Although I do think they are a team that needs to get some more starting pitching at this deadline, even if it's the Eric Feddes of the world. Like, just plug in some more dependable arms, because I think that'll help them really be able to outlast in this wildcard race. But if you're looking at the rest of that Central Division, I think they might be the most fun team to sort of hop on that bandwagon, because when they get going, it certainly seems like it's an entertaining ride.
Yeah, they just sent down Graham Ashcraft, so
Yeah.
starting pitching definitely is one of those areas that they could look to improve. And they've got players with special tools, elite tools. Blake Dunn just got called up. He's a speed merchant. Fernando Cruz has been one of the best setup men in all of baseball, and he's a interesting story. A guy playing in independent leagues, and now again is elite there, setting up for Alexis Diaz, brother of help me out here, Edwin Diaz.
Edwin, yeah.
Oh, what do you know?
Who's pitching in Brooklyn right now in single A rehab? So
I should have said Alexis Diaz, the 2016 World Baseball Classic closer for Team Puerto Rico, because is Edwin Diaz ever going to be allowed to do that again?
No,
I don't think so.
No chance. No chance.
Yeah, but the Reds have been everything kind of that we hope for them to be, and And Ellie was really quiet after that 4 stolen base game that he had over the course of about 16 or so games. He had like 2 steals. So he kind of, the league was, I think, figuring him out just a little bit. And now he's kind of started to figure out some things. And it's nice to see the Reds getting in that mix just a little bit here in the NL Central.
Yeah, I think they are right now the team of that group that I like the most. The Cardinals, they shot up, then they started to fade back a little bit. The Cubs are the team that we're all sort of waiting on to put it all together. And I wouldn't count them out to do that. I also wouldn't count them out to be very aggressive at the deadline. They have the type of farm system where they can make some big moves and try to put themselves right back into that conversation. But it is pretty crazy. Here we are, getting towards the middle of June, and it's becoming a foregone conclusion that the Brewers are going to win that division. And I mean, yes, there's still time for one of these other teams to sneak in there, but it's amazing how much they have separated themselves from the pack. When I still, if you like, all right, Patrick, let me ask you, can you name me 3 starting pitchers in the Milwaukee Brewers rotation right now?
Pass. All right, we've got Freddie Peralta. I'm showing my ass here on this one. All right, Freddie Peralta. I imagine maybe Aaron Ashby has gotten called back up again. Yes?
Maybe.
Oh, you don't even know?
I don't know. I tossed the grenade to you.
Back and be like, guys, that feels right. Yeah, all right. You have control of the board.
I tossed the grenade to you, and then I was gonna when I knew you'd fail, I was gonna throw. I know Colin Ray's in the rotation. I know that one.
Yes, REA.
REA, Colin Ray. I think I was calling him Colin Rea until I actually watched him pitch and heard the broadcast. Okay, yeah, there's no chance. I'm looking at roster resource. You have no chance to get these names. Ashby not in the rotation. It's Bryce Wilson right now.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Rodriguez will start on Tuesday, June 11th.
Did not have him on my board.
Don't know who he is. Tobias Myers.
There we go.
Tobias. I mean, it's Peralta, and then who knows? How do they win these games? How do you win? I mean, they have a great bullpen, clearly, but it is pretty nuts what the Brewers have done this year.
They've had 6 guys on the IL that I think a lot of fans probably have heard of. Like, okay, Brandon Woodruff, we know.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy John. Wade Miley, still around. He's 49 years old at this point. Joe Ross. Yeah, that Joe Ross that disappeared and then came back. 4th on the notable name list. I'm actually going to give Jacob Junis a little love there on that as a swingman guy that I think if he's healthy, he could be interesting. DL Hall, obviously a major piece in the Corbin Burns deal, and then Robert Gasser, who looks great in just coming up from the minors. So yeah, 6 starters, not great right now.
The old 4-man rotation in Milwaukee and a lot of bullpen games, and it's working for them. It's working. It's they've had 11 guys make a start this year. That's because a lot of them are opener situations, but getting the job done. But it's pretty impressive. Cincinnati, meanwhile, has a better rotation and can't sniff the Brewers right now. But you win. You take this 7-game winning streak. You turn it into 15. You never know. Maybe the Reds do make it a conversation by the end of the season.
It's interesting that you said, and I agree with you, but that the Brewers, foregone conclusion, they're going to win the division. I agree. But in the National League, they've got the smallest lead over second place. They're 6.5 games ahead of the Cubs. And then you've got the Dodgers are 8 games ahead of the Padres, and Phillies are 9 games ahead of Atlanta. So it's the smallest lead, but still, but it's bigger than everyone in the American League. So, yeah, and I think the Brewers are going to win the Central.
They're the only team in the Central currently with a record over 500. The rest of those teams, all right around, I think they're all like actually exactly 2 games under, and the Pirates 3. So they're all. I mean, we don't even talk about the Pirates, and they got the best starting pitching in this division probably. With Skeens and Jones. So you really don't know. I mean, it really is anyone's division. I think those other 4 teams are playing for wild cards, but we just read off that Brewers rotation. There is a world where the lineup falls off, the bullpen's not as good, and they can go through like they're a clear slump as a team. It probably isn't as much of a foregone conclusion as I made it out to seem, but that's just how well they've played up to this point.
No, I think consistency is such a key part of being successful right now in 2024 with injuries and kind of sustaining that and having a next man up, policy, so to speak, and being able to do that. Because right now, other than the Rockies and Marlins in the National League, everybody's within 3 games of that wild card spot. And so there's obviously some tough questions that have to be answered come trade deadline. I think, the Mets, where they're at right now, third from the bottom, it's going to be easy, I think, for them to sell, seeing as though that's kind of part of that plan. But all the other teams, you could see them trying to maybe hold pat just a little bit. The Nationals, not quite as much. They're fourth from the bottom. But everybody else, hey, you know what? You need to go out, and this is a year for the Diamondbacks. We're kind of really counting on going to back-to-back postseasons, and San Francisco is invested in St. Louis after their first losing season in a very long time in 2023. They're not looking to cash out their chips either. So it's just about that consistency and really trying to do the best with what you can when your star players go down, which has been, far too frequent throughout the game right now.
Yeah, no, it creates for an insane finish. It creates for crazy deadlines too, because you mentioned the Mets as potential sellers, and I think they might be motivated by what they can get. Where you just get to a point where you're just, even if the Mets were sitting this exact same spot, if they were 2 games out, even closer, if they're about to get a haul for Luis Severino and Sean Manaea and JD Martin, like they might be like, all right, well, we might as well take advantage of this opportunity because you don't know how many chances you get at this type of a seller's market. That's what's going to make our next episode so interesting, because we're already breaking down the top 25 trade value assets as we write the article over at Just Baseball. So make sure you check that out. We're going to come to you some point midweek. If you're listening on the audio side, thank you. If you're not, you're watching on YouTube, hey, you can listen as well. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube, where you have the smaller clips of the show that we break up as well as the full episodes. Follow us at Who's Better BB. We'll be back talking trade deadline on the show later this week.